Black Magic Woman podcast acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on. We also acknowledge traditional owners of the land where you, the listener or viewer, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to our elders past and present and acknowledge that this always was Aboriginal land and always will be Aboriginal land.
Welcome to the Black Magic Woman podcast with Mundanara Bales.
Welcome back to another episode of the Black Magic Woman podcast. I am back on my ancestral lands, which is beautiful Gadigal country, aka Sydney, right here on the harbour, getting ready for one of the biggest nights of the year for the Indigenous business sector, or for just people in business, especially some of our big corporates that are all part of Supply Nation. So we're about to get ready for a big 2 days, and I thought, why not record a few episodes while I'm here? So to have an opportunity to sit here on the couch with you, my sister, Sasha, who I just saw literally a couple of days ago in beautiful Nam on Wurundjeri country, and then to be here. So talk about our ancestors working their magic. But for those that don't know you, can I get you to introduce yourself? So your name, your mob, and even if you can share a little bit about where you grew up.
I'm Sasha Kutabah Sarago. I am a proud Wadjanbarra Yidinji, Jirrbal and African-American woman. And my country is up in far north Queensland. So we are in Gigorou. So Atherton Tablelands, down to Daintree, down to Tully. So our mob's both rainforest clans. And I'm here in Warung in Sydney. Been here for about 4 years. I moved down just before COVID. And yeah, I'm just in a new chapter of my career, trying to get things rolling. And it was so, is it serendipitous?
These big English,
these deadly words.
Trying to get our tongue around and our heads around these words.
Absolutely.
Serendipitous. I haven't heard that. I haven't heard a word like that.
Yeah.
On this podcast.
And I had written down. Got it. Serendipitous. And I had it written down on a post-it note for months because I seen you first time round up in Meanjin for my book launch.
Yes.
And we had a good yarn, tears were flowing, and I wrote down I need to hit this up because I want to get on the podcast because I've been listening to you for the longest time and I just love your yarns because it's just one of those podcasts where you feel like you're in the room with that person, and I thought I love that intimacy. Mm-hmm. So it was just so deadly because I was thinking, oh, she's proper busy and you just got that deal with iHeart, and I was like, oh, I need to schedule in some time with sis, I might be, on the waiting list.
Well, you were on my I've got this bucket list of all the people that you come across, or like when I met you, they already bought the book. Your book was gifted to me by Marty from Pantera Press.
Wow.
And he said, have a look at this. I'm like, oh my God, I need to write a book. I want to do what you've done. And it's interesting. You've been thinking of me. I've been thinking of you. You're listening to me. I'm reading your book. And then I turn up to that launch and I literally, I don't know where I was, but someone said to me, oh my God, you come to the book launch. I'm like, what launch? Sasha's in town. I'm like, Sasha, I'm reading her book. She's launching it. I'm like, I'm coming now. So I rock up there. I had a board meeting. I turn up Chelsea. I was still in the board meeting trying to figure out how do I not send my apologies last minute and be at your event. I'd done the board meeting and couldn't say hello to you pre-event. Remember you and Chelsea was yarning?
Yeah.
So I'm doing the board meeting and looking at you kind of hi, but I'm sorry.
I had no idea.
And then afterwards we got to hang out. So we only met proper
briefly.
But I want to let you know that I actually watched you grace the catwalk in the Queen Street Mall for Janali when you launched that Aboriginal swimsuit modelling calendar.
Yes.
I was in high school and that was yes, I know nearly every little girl wants to be a supermodel and I was one of them. But seeing you, and I remember Liza and her
Nina Paulson.
Yes, Shani Haggerty. Big shout out to my sister Shani. So there was Shani, there was you, Delvine. Oh my
yes.
gosh. So
Yeah.
that was the moment for me watching, and I never forgot. I remember running into, I know when I met you all, and only you recently, but that was about 20.
That's 20 plus years ago.
Years, showing our age, right?
And we're still deadly.
We still got it. So I actually first saw you when I was 14, 15, around then. Then I finally got to meet you at your book launch. And then just a couple of days ago, I flew into Naarm, which is Melbourne. For people that don't know our traditional names, we're starting to normalise the Aboriginal language for different places. So I flew into Naarm for the Women's Leadership Conference, but it was for First Nations women at the Sofitel. It was beautiful. And I saw the speakers. So I'm like, I'm going there. And it was interesting because I've never been like approached before in places and said, are you speaking? Not like, I just go to conferences and I just do me. So I turned up, and in the morning tea break, this lady comes up to me and she's like, are you the podcast? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, you're not on the program. Please tell me you're speaking. I'm like, no. She's like, are you just here like us? I'm like, yeah. And I thought, you know what? For me, it's about showing up for other Black women. And I think the organisers thought that I was speaking because they sat me on the speaker's table. I got to hear you again. So the first time was at your book launch. The second time was only 4 days ago in Naarm. And the first thing you said, and I wrote it down, the first thing you said was, do you remember that time when you noticed or felt or something about either being beautiful or not feeling beautiful?
Can you remember the first time you formed a definition of beauty?
Can you? Yes. Yep. And straight away, all I thought about was my mum saying to me, you're going to marry a rich man and he's going to look after you and all of us. Was she saying, you're beautiful and you can, you're going to, be successful? She wasn't saying that to me. She thought that my looks was going to set our family up. And I have never thought about that. And my mum died 22 years ago. But I sat there thinking that my mum, when I was probably 11, first said something to me that made me think about, my mum must think that I'm really beautiful or attractive. But I don't think she realised that one day her daughter was going to be successful without marrying a rich old man. That's what I thought about when you opened up.
That's amazing.
It was quite a full-on moment to reflect because my mum has passed. But you then went straight into, your modelling career and the life that you've lived and some of your experiences. And I'm just going to hand over the microphone to you. You grew up, was you born in the US?
Born in Wadjarbarra country.
Oh, so you were born in Victoria.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that story is, okay, if we go back a little bit.
Yeah.
So my great uncle is George Brackenridge. So he was a boxer. And so he came down and some of our Queensland mob came down because they were knocking around being successful. And so that kind of set the tone for mum to come down with mob. And so, they had their little moment in Geelong. And then, she met my father when they moved to Perth. And then so from the age of 3 to 9, I lived in the US. So that really set the tone as far as what I was exposed to when it came to representation.
And I think that's important for people to understand.
Because I spoke about that in the keynote about how that time in the US was very pivotal for me. It was the 90s, as I was saying in my keynote, that it was the rise of rap and hip hop and R&B. There was Black entertainers dominating the entertainment industry. And so that was the rise of Black shows. So there was no touch point where you did not see yourself reflected. Coming to Australia, it's a totally different story. And I think we all know that. Being 80s, 90s babies, there was very little for us. I remember I think it was Marsha Hines. It was was it Trisha Goddard from Play School back in the day? Was it only black faces? And then even with the songstresses
for this long.
Denny Hines.
Yes.
Then when Christine Anu, and I talk about her in my book, how like we would race to the TV, and when we seen was it the party video or Styling Up, one of them records?
Yes.
Yeah, we were just there singing up, dancing up, and it was because we seen a sister girl on TV. So for me, I'm glad that I had that exposure in the US of black models, and that's where I wanted to be a black supermodel, because I see Naomi Campbell, Tyra Banks, Veronica Webb, you name it, strutting on this predominantly white runway, and they were just black women who claimed that space. And you know, when you see someone, you're just like, I want to be like them. And so that's when the seed was planted for me, and that really reaffirmed to me my black matters. It's always mattered, but then it was just a different struggle, because then there was this introduction of, okay, you've got two black cultures. One is embraced, and that's the African-American culture. Now you've got First Nations culture, and that was really jarring because I never grew up on country. So I was just getting introduced to my cousins and my extended family for the first time.
Wow.
And coming, to Gimoy, being this kid with white sneakers, real Americanized, and cousins be like, Auntie, why she talk like that? And having this really heavy American accent. So I had a stigma and, cultural identity issues, because I was trying to, straddle two black cultures and find where I belong in that.
Wow.
And then there was also that element of internalized racism, because, we were living in the 90s, being a teenager. People wanted to be down with Snoop Doggy Dogg and rap and R&B. And then when they found out you were African-American, it was like, oh, sweet. But then it was, oh, you're Aboriginal too. We can't digest that. That's too much for us. And so, having that conversation in the book of when you go through that, and we've all gone through that moment where we're trying to find our place, whether it's our blackness, being a young woman, our beauty, and it's hard for our sisters because there's so much that is stacked up against us, and trying to find the essence of us, where we stop, where we start, where we can just pivot and go, I'm not feeling this today. I want to be a brand new person. Do we have the opportunity or the grace? Do we have the support? And a lot of these conversations I have in my very first memoir.
Tell us about it.
Oh, okay.
So, did you always want to write a book? Was this a dream of yours?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was a black nerd. I think someone at the conference mentioned that. I was like, I was one too, that awkward black girl.
Yeah.
And I had a library card.
Yeah, you read.
I read.
Love reading
that's
books.
All I do is get on my little BMX, because we didn't have much money, and that was a chance where I could build a world through fantasy, through words, and I loved English, loved writing, and so that library card was my freedom pass. And I remember my first book, I wrote it, I think I was in grade 3, it was a dinosaur book, it was got contact on it and everything, it was bounded, it was deadly. And I remember that feeling of seeing my words on paper, and so to be, 42, publishing my first book, memoir, it was that coming of age, that full circle moment where I have something to say. I've always had something to say, and to be able to have my voice in black and white, it means so much, because it's been a long time coming. So it's a blessing, and it came at the right time, because I think we talked earlier. I think there's always, we grew up in a culture of the hustle and grind, the top 30, under 30s achieving in business. You hear these categories and these awards. And sometimes in the scheme of it, you feel like I'm not achieving as much as I should at this age. But now I think the conversation has changed, where we're going, people started at 42, 50, 60, doing careers or entering in spaces for the very first time, and they're killing it. So you don't have to have it all figured out at 20, 30.
You know what? I think for us, as especially as women, right, we're nurturers. We are the ones to look after children and to look after the elderly. We are the ones that kind of, we're the backbones of our families, right? So how do you hold a job down or get ahead with education or go and study a beauty course and be a mum and be a wife and support all these other people, because that's what we do as Black women. So, you know what, I think we have high expectations. I don't know where this came from, but someone said to me about, you know, we need to have high expectations. I'm like, excuse me? My mum and dad and my grandmother, everyone around me, all had high expectations, not just of themselves, but of us, and were high achievers. But we just didn't put it out there. We didn't big note it. You didn't tell the world about it like you can now. So, but I think sometimes we don't give ourselves enough credit because we're not individuals. You know, in the Western world, it's all about the individual. It's I, me. We are part of, and it's multi-layered and it's highly complex being Black. But we're not just individuals. So there's so much riding on us as well when we don't achieve or we don't succeed. Like, I think we just have so much pressure on ourselves. And I think every person in your family and community have been your biggest supporters and have been cheering you on from the sidelines, especially breaking through the modelling scene here in this country back when Black was not, you talked about that makeup artists couldn't do you because they didn't have the makeup products. Your hair was different, so you just got pushed to the side. You've overcome a lot. You've literally kicked down doors. They might not have kicked down at the start, but now to have a book and to reflect on all of that, you know, for other young women, especially other young women of colour, I know your book, it was like I was reading my life. There was moments there where I was like, I cannot believe these are your experiences because they were my experiences. And I keep going back to, you know, for us as young women, not especially young Black women, not to be too hard on ourselves because of all of the other kind of obligations, family, community, cultural obligations that we have, that we can't say no to. And then we're trying to hustle. You launched a magazine, right? And I heard the first Black digital magazine in the country when Black wasn't really kind of in. Like it's in now because my kids told me people want to be Black. So this book, you've always been a nerd, loved reading. Do you remember that your library card was your freedom pass?
And I think that was the combination of things working together. And, you know, I yarned to you guys at the conference that it was my mother who introduced me to the world of beauty and entrepreneurship as a 12-year-old. Shout out to Delphine Sarago, the G from day one. She broke in an industry because she too was introduced to beauty work at the age of, I think, 15. She was in the bush colouring because she's an artist as well, and using all the natural flowers and bush foods to make paint for canvases. Then she saw the person's skin and thought, I want to work on that canvas. And so she went to beauty school. She was the first Aboriginal woman in Gigorou and to have a beauty salon in the CBD. And that's where I was introduced to beauty.
And we're going back about 40 years ago.
Oh
this wasn't just in the last.
Yes.
Wow.
And the best thing about Majal Beauty Salon, so Majal stands for cocky apple in the Jirrbal language, my grandmother's language, and she was blessed with that name, and she serviced the Indigenous community, Indigenous women who were overlooked, underrepresented in beauty. We could not go to white beauty establishments because, one, we weren't welcomed, two, like I said before, even in the modeling industry, they didn't know how to work with Black hair and skin. So my mom filled that gap, and she was so deadly because we would go to communities. We'd go to Jirrbal, and it's funny because I ran into Alvarina Johnson, and she's in the book, and her
oh my gosh.
chapter Jirrbal was because of her wedding. And so we did her wedding when I was a small girl, 12 years old, going to Jirrbal, and we were doing this big bridal party, and I talk about that. And so these are the experiences of when you're exposed to an industry or you get to beautify Black women. And so that's a very sacred, beautiful space that I have never read about, or I have never had that conversation in this country. And so it's really special for me to share that, because even as Black girls and women, when do we have those moments where we get to just be beautiful, soft? I redefine Black femininity on my terms, on how I see it and how I've seen it growing up. And, you know, even going back to the point of you saying about, you know, giving ourselves grace, especially as Black women, we are the foundation of our communities. And we were even yarning at the conference that it wasn't until like the 2018 NAIDOC thing, because of Her We Can, that the spotlight was put on Black women of, yes, she is the queen. She is the nurturer. She is the problem solver. She is all things. But when have we celebrated her? When have we taken care of her? And I pose a question also in the book. Do Black women know how to ask for help? Because it just goes without saying that we will clean up messes. We will make it all better.
Yeah. Mend families.
Yeah.
Like you said, problem solver. Reminds me of my mum in Redfern having women knocking on the door. Well, the door wasn't even closed.
It was probably always open.
Always open.
It was an open door policy.
Always.
Yeah.
Always open. And my dad, I remember the door didn't even lock. So we'd have strangers waking up in our house. My dad would be like, hey, mate, what are you doing here? Just because the door was unlocked. So my mum, though, I realise now, later in life, that these women were fleeing domestic violence, or they had been evicted and they had children, or they knew that someone like my mum could help them with the system, whether it was the Department of Children's Services, whether it was enrolling their kids into school, whether it was helping them fill out a form because they were illiterate. I didn't realise how many women came to my house for my mum. You just seen them at the table having, you know, how many cups of tea. There must have been a lot of women there, especially during the day, because when we got home from school, there was so much washing up to do. And I'm like, we've been all gone. There's no kids here. But my mum was that person. And, you know, I meet a lot of women as I'm growing up and, you know, going back to Redfern, and people say, oh, your mother, you know, they tell me stories. I came to your mum this time, or I come to your house this time, or we had nowhere to go. And man, I just thought, how deadly is our culture where there's no judgment? People know in those communities whose doors you can knock on, what woman or what elder, what uncle, who you can go to talk to. Like we've got all of the, if you think about like everyone, you know, psychologists or counselors, we don't have no qualifications from no universities, but like we deal with some of the most complex situations behind closed doors, and my mum never made a fuss. And, you know, I reflected on my mum that year because of her I Can. And then this year's NAIDOC theme was for our elders, again, reflecting on, you know, the elders that are here for us, but the ones that have also passed, and the opportunities that we have today, especially when it comes to being in business. You know, my dad used to talk about self-determination, you know, being in control of our own affairs. And when we're running our own affairs, you know, that's when we can start, if you think about like success or closing the gap, like we can contribute to our own success. And all of these issues and problems that, you know, has happened over the years that we don't have control of. But one thing that we do have control of is our own lives. And I love just I love being inspired by other Black women. I'm like, oh my God, they've lived a similar life. They get it. Like, that's the kind of woman I want to take advice from. So your book, the name of the book, when I first read it, I used to work at the Greek Club. And there's a very well-known Aboriginal, she might be Torres Strait as well, woman, Sandra King.
Yes, which I shout Miss Sandra.
I know you do. Okay. I'm pretty sure her married name or her ex-husband, I'm sorry, Auntie Sandra, very similar. She was married to a Greek man, and her surname was like this for a while. And I thought for one moment that this was a Greek word, but it's not. It's a word from your language that means, is it beautiful?
Yeah,
yes.
Gigorou.
Gigorou.
Yes.
Okay, so for people that cannot pronounce the name of the book, there's a lot of books these days where we're kind of reclaiming our language.
Yes.
And I love that you used your language because you're reclaiming beauty and redefining beauty.
Redefining it. And it was a conversation that started with my TED Talk, the decolonizing of beauty. And I've always known beauty through a Western framework, through a Western lens, through how white people seen it and seen me through it. And so now it's time for me to look at beauty the way that I want to. And that's through the women in my family, my matriarchs, the creation stories, my culture, and how I want it to be. So we're just shifting that paradigm, saying you don't get to define it for me.
I love this.
I'm taking the reins.
I love it. And that is like so empowering for just Black women, full stop. Not even young Black women, just for us as Black women, full stop. Because we've always, and I've struggled, you know, when you see, you know, women on TV and models, and a lot of them, like you said, you know, representation matters. And my little one, Tiger Lily, beautiful. For the first couple of years, she kept saying to me, you know, she's only 7. Why do I have this color skin? Because she's quite dark. She said, Mum, I want white skin. I said, no. You're beautiful, Mum. You're a beautiful little Black girl. You're Murray, Fijian, Kiwi. This is what you're meant to look like. You know, it's been hard raising a young, beautiful Aboriginal girl in a white neighborhood. She doesn't see many people, full stop, male, female, young, or oldest people. She does not see many people that look like her. So she's reminded nearly every day as a 7-year-old that she's different. So what would you say to those young little girls like Tiger Lily, but those young girls that I hope watch or listen to this podcast about embracing their beauty, or, you know, knowing that they're not, like you said, you know, to see us through our own lens, to read this book for little people that are not ready to read this book yet. But I really want young people like Tiger Lily to hear women like you that have succeeded being a model with your magazine and writing a book. And I know the films, you've done so much, Sasha. What's some advice that you would give to them?
Thank you so much, sis. I've got goosebumps because it's, you know, it's the conversation that I wish I had with somebody at Tiger Lily's age. And I would say to her, Bob, your beauty, your Gigorou is your business. Yeah, it doesn't get to be decided or discussed or negotiated with anybody but yourself. And when you need inspiration, you look at your matriarchs, the conversations and what they say to you, the affirmations that they share with you. You look at the spaces on country, your land, where you come from, where your ancestors walked thousands and thousands of years. That's your Gigorou. And what do you feel when you're in your country, on your space, where that's sacred? It's your family. It's your culture. You feel it. Sometimes you don't see it. You feel it. That's where it starts. Once you feel it first, then you'll be able to see it. and you see it the way that you want to see it. I'm tearing up right now because it's, I feel like I've got Tiger Lily here. I feel like I've got my mini me here, my nieces, and that's the last chapter of the book, Dear Niecey. It's that conversation that I want all of us to have with our inner selves. And it doesn't matter how old you are. It's a constant conversation because there's moments where we can hit rock bottom and not know whether we're coming or going. But all we need, and you know how it feels when you have a sister that just gives you that look, gives you that rub on the back, just gives you a hug, just acknowledges you, that lifts your spirit. And that's the beauty of Black women, that we hold space for each other and we don't have to do much, but it speaks volumes. And it's always that moment where you might have that deadly auntie that's the only auntie you can speak to, tell her all your business, and she would just make you feel like you were everything, So Tiger Lily, you are Gigorou all day, every day. And it's the Gigorou that you get to define for yourself. It's always starts and finishes with you.
And I think that's what's important, that we don't let other people define who we are, especially when it comes to being a Black woman. You wrote, and there was the film.
Yeah, Too Pretty to be Aboriginal.
To be Aboriginal. I don't know how many of my sisters have heard that. And I'm pretty sure that you're listening right now or watching on YouTube and you're going, this happens to me daily.
We'd be millionaires.
Yeah. For every time that we heard it. Quickly tell me about that. Obviously, you were inspired by people saying that to you.
Yeah, so it started as a 9-year-old having that question asked. I think it was 9 or 11 at a birthday party. And it was the first time that my Aboriginality was questioned, because I was a proud Aboriginal young girl and you couldn't tell me nothing. But until that day when I was asked, what's your background? And that comment came, you're too pretty to be Aboriginal. That gave me the complex. That gave me that Black stain. And so I wanted to unpack that because it stayed with me. It took me 20 plus years to reconcile that and come to my Gigorou. But it was weighed down by colonization, the sexual exploitation of Aboriginal women, the way that we were defined by white men. And then it became the stigma that was carried with us. And, the tropes like black velvet, gin, lubra. And I had a conversation with my auntie because someone said something, they were yarning about something, and someone said, oh, yeah, they used to call us black velvet. And I was like, what's black velvet? And she said, black, smooth skin, velvet to the touch. And she, made me fill in the blank. And then that's when I took that, journey to figure out what happened. Why are Black women defined in a certain way? Why is it negative? Why is it all the things that we're not? And so that led me to the journey of, I want to yarn about this. I want to have conversations with Black women about this statement, that we get to interrogate this and, stamp it out, because it needs to stop.
Of course.
Who gets to define our Blackness?
And it's conversations like this that people start to kind of, check themselves on what they think or what they thought or what they've heard.
Why did you think it was appropriate to come up to a stranger and say that?
Yeah.
And think that I would feel real deadly about myself?
I know,
afterwards?
thanks. Like it's a compliment.
Thank you.
And then, can I buy you a drink? No. I can't buy my own drink. And it's like, hey, it's all good. I'm like, no, it's not all good.
Yeah.
I love the fact that you have Ascension. So if anyone has not yet jumped online and had a look at your magazine, can you share with our listeners and also viewers on YouTube about your magazine? It will be in the show notes as well. But just so people can stay engaged, up to date, see what you're doing. Your magazine will be probably something that you're kind of active with.
Well,
there's a few other things
behind in the background. So it's ascensionmag.com, and we'll have that in the show notes.
Yeah.
But it's been 10 plus years. So it's going to be relaunched in a different format. So we'll have like redirections going to the new site, sashasarago.com, to watch this space. But all the content from over the years is still active and live. These are relevant conversations that are still being had. It's, you know, a documentation of representation of women of color in this country, and it needs to stay live because we still have young girls coming up with the same issues about their natural hair, colorism, too pretty to be Aboriginal, like all these issues that just seem to not go away, but at least we can arm them with the authority and the confidence to tackle these issues on their terms. I
absolutely love it. And I just want to sit here and yarn with you all day.
Same, sis. You got me going now.
We need to catch up.
Yep.
And not wait for a podcast to actually hang out, check in, share stories, empower each other, inspire each other, and just to know that we've got each other's back. So I cannot believe that we are here having this yarn, because I still remember, you know, my 14-year-old self watching on the runway. For the very first time in my life, I saw Black, like Aboriginal women, not Naomi Campbell. I saw Aboriginal women being kind of like, people were in awe. You drew a crowd, and I was getting lost in that crowd. I'll never forget that day. And there's only a few moments in my life where I felt that the mainstream community embraced Aboriginal beauty. There's not many moments that I've actually experienced it or seen it or witnessed it. That was the first time. So I just want to say it's been an absolute privilege to sit on this couch and yarn with you about things that we don't talk about much. But this was a yarn that I was really looking forward to. For everyone else, you've got to get Sasha's book, Gigorou. Gigorou. It might take you a few times to get to roll the tongue. Gigorou, jump online, have a look at the show notes, go to sashasarago.com.
That's it.
And check out her digital mag that she's bringing back. So on that note, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you, my sis. It's been a pleasure.
Love it. Oh, and really quickly, Titters, this T-shirt, that's usually something that kind of speaks to me when I do a podcast or I'm out and about or at a conference. And this was the shirt that spoke to me today. So Nita Heiss, my sister, who's also an author and has been on the podcast, I absolutely loved the play, loved the book. So I thought this shirt was for this podcast. So thank you.
Thank you, sis.
If you'd like any more info on today's guest, please visit our show notes in the episode description. A big shout out to all you Deadly Mob and allies who continue to listen, watch and support our podcast. Your feedback means the world. You can rate and review the podcast on Apple and Spotify, or even head to our socials and YouTube channel and drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. The Black Magic Woman podcast is produced by Clint Curtis.